I went to country school, number 10, for 2 years maybe, and then I went to Cosgrove, and then our community got together as Clear Creek Amana the year that we graduated, and so I graduated from Oxford. That's where the high school was then. Folks were farmers, and my dad had a second job later on as a deputy sheriff. I was the oldest of 7 children, and I knew that I wanted to do something after high school. I wanted to have some kind of adventure. I had a girlfriend, and she was going to business college, and I thought, well, I guess I'll go to business college. At that time, there was one in Iowa City. And I thought, well, I don't have any money. And so I think I better get a job first, and of course buy a car. So I worked as a nurse's aide at the University Hospital. And I was so fortunate to have fantastic nurses on C34. It was a woman's ward. And they were so good to me and made me feel like I was really helping. And because of them, I said, no business college, I'm going to become a nurse. And then I went to, at that time, a 3-year college in Broadlawns in Des Moines. Had another girlfriend, and she said, you know, I have found out that if you join the Army Nurse Corps, your last year of nurses training, they will help you pay for your last year of nurses training if in return you give them 2 years of active duty. And again I said, whew, we'll get to travel and see different things. That's what we'll do. And so she and I decided to buddy plan. And we were paid something like, I think $300 a month. At that time, we didn't have a commission, so we were privates. And that helped pay for her schooling. But I was managing okay with the money I had made at my job. And so I put that away and gave that as a Christmas gift to my sister, who was next in line. And the thought was, okay, now when it's your turn to venture out, you help Richard. And maybe we can all get to do things that we want to do. And so that's the way I did that. We knew Vietnam was going on, and because we had heard about it. And when you go in, you put down your preferences. So Verna and I said, let's go for it. The biggest and the best. Walter Reed, we hadn't seen the East Coast. Fitzsimmons, we hadn't seen the West Coast. Anyway, we got Fitzsimmons. And we were there, and we went skiing, and such a venture. I invited my whole family out to see, that was in Denver, invited my whole family, and I just felt like we were living the life, you know. 3 months we were there and received our orders for Vietnam. Basic training is Fort Sam Houston. At that time, I had a Pontiac Lamaze, you know, brand new, and I and Verna loaded that thing. It was so packed, and we took off to basic training. And we were down there, and we marched, and we had platoon sergeants, you know, barking at us, and we went to classes. We learned about gas warfare, you know, and we would have to put a gas mask on and walk into this house, and then just before we went out the door, we were ordered to take it off, and then we knew what the effect of it was, and we went out the door. And just like everybody else, we had to get all these shots. Of course, you had a family leave, and you came home, but you had orders, yes. And you went over to Vietnam. Landing in Long Binh is kind of where everybody came in, and just spent time walking along, getting all your uniform and everything piled up, and then you were flown by helicopter to where your first duty was. And so my first duty was in Saigon. Oh, we thought we could save the world. I mean, that's what we were started out to do, you know, when you're that age. Oh, I was old being 20, you know. I was an old person. It was right in downtown Saigon. So the hospital was a structured wooden structure. I think it must have been something previously, and right beside it was an old hotel. We called it Massachusetts, and that is where the nurses stayed in rooms, and then we were assigned where we were to work by the chief nurse, the nurse in charge. So we wore white uniforms there. We wore white uniforms and the white hat, and they would have different wards. I have a diagram of how it was all put together, and on a rare occasion, we would get direct in, but it was very rare. Most of the time, those patients had been to a clearing station, possibly a surgical hospital, and third field in Saigon was called a field hospital, and then right beside us, is probably the reason we were there, was the Tonsanute Air Force Base. That's where the guys got on the Freedom Birds, and they went back to the world. Oftentimes, we would have post-op neuro patients because, to my knowledge, that was the only place we knew of a neuro doctor. So other outlying patients, when they got head injuries, decisions had to be made. And the big word for that is triage. And that is a tough situation in a war zone. Because if you, when I was at another location, if the decision was made that they're too unstable to get to Saigon, they would probably die before they got there. So when we got the nod, corpsmen, nurses, whoever, these patients were put behind a screen, and word gets out among these young kids, and they knew if they were put behind a screen, probably their hours were limited. But speaking for all nurses, and until I listened to other nurses, I didn't know it, we all made sure that no one ever died alone. And we took turns. Some would spend a long time there, others a very short time. The first thing they would always ask you, where are you from in the world? And I would tell them I'm from Iowa, and where are you from? And we did a lot of kind of little white lies. No matter where they said they were from, you said, I've heard of that, and tell me about it. We would always get around to saying, everyone back there is so proud of you. You are all doing so great. And we knew what they would were thinking, so we would just say, you are doing so great in this lousy war. The one story I don't want to go without, it was my turn, and this young man was so burnt that his eyes were swollen shut, and practically his whole body was black. We talked a little bit, and then he said, what do you look like? And I said, well, when I got here, I had short blonde hair, but wearing this uniform, I've let my hair grow, so it's longer now. And I'm kind of short, kind of medium built, and he said, "Could I touch your hair?" And you want to know that I went on my knees and lifted that one black hand and let him feel what he could of my hair, and that's a changing moment. I'll never forget that for the rest of my life. I asked him, "Have we given you enough pain medication? Are you hurting?" And because morphine flowed, and a lot of them would come in with an M on their forehead. They had already received it somewhere along the line. But he said, "No, I'm having no pain." And so we just continued to talk. But see, this did happen in a field hospital very often, because things were, yeah, they were getting the ones that were for sure probably going home. But yeah, the most, wounds that were really bad would come from the North Vietnam Army. Maggots were a godsend. And it's unbelievable to see a young 17-year-old who has both hips up in a bed, and he's got to be there for a while. He can't turn. We would have patients for a while. They would have to go back for debridement because of these wounds being dirty. They would have to keep the dead skin away, hoping that it would heal from the inside out. Multiple frag wounds, MFW. Practically everybody started out MFW, multiple frag. Then it got more specific in their diagnosis. But he had multiple frag wounds on his back. And so he was laying there day after day, wasn't ready to be moved yet, he wasn't stable enough. But the maggots, he would see him and he'd say, "Oh, take the tongue blade, get back in there. You're helping that wound stay clean, and I'm going back to the world." And the doctor said, when they took him to OR, it was the cleanest wounds they had ever seen. And that boy accepted it like, whatever I have to do to get back home. Every nurse had a pair of these scissors and a tourniquet, something that you could do a trach with if you had to. Yeah. And you would start from the wrists, and you would start from the ankles. Oh, actually the boots. You would cut right through the shoestrings, and you just kept cutting until you could just peel everything back, because you were hunting for the entrance wound, which may be small, but the exit wound was always traumatic, because it was big, and that's where probably the bleeding was the most uncontrolled. And there's things you don't forget, because if a young soldier is out in the field, his leg is hurt, they are taught, and wisely taught, what's the first thing to stabilize that is their gun. That gun is slapped on there, it's wrapped around, and they are air carried out by the first chopper that can get into them. They land in our heliport, carried in. We cut it open. I was with this young man by myself. I put my hand underneath the heel, and the gun has been removed. The corpsman took care of that. I put my hand under there and was looking at the damage that was done, and the boot fell off in my hand. And the young man laying flat was looking right at me. And I'm so sorry. And you put it down, and you put the tourniquet around it, and you said, "Doc, bleeding is under control here," but he was trying to decide which of those in the room were going into surgery first. And if the leg was gone, and the bleeding was under control, there may be someone else first. But how those young kids would accept something like that was just beyond me. My thing was they would lose these limbs. If it was an arm comes in all wrapped up, it's no longer connected. To me, that belonged to them. And I would have to take that and just lay it down underneath their cot. And the corpsman caught on to that. I just couldn't take it and throw it in the garbage bag. I just thought that was not respectful. That's how I handled that. But nobody ever called by the right name. And of course, nobody in Ly K, nobody even used rank. I was LT or Joanne. And Tex, what are you missing? Well, I don't have my right foot. Well, I don't have my left foot. Somebody might say, I don't have either one, but I'm going home. I'm going to get artificial feet, and I can kick anybody's ass in this room just like I've done before. And, you know, they were jubilant because they are all going home, and they are so happy for each other, themselves. Their time is done. That's what it was, survival. This was way up north in Fubai, and that was when the first calf was the first to come home, and we did not have backup then because we were on the edge of, we called it a big rubber plantation. I mean, it was just trees that were close together. And our area of this mobile inflatable hospital was nothing but dirt because it had all been destroyed by Agent Orange. And of course, nobody even thought about Agent Orange. It had a purpose, and it did its job well, and you just never thought of it until later. But all you had to do was ask them. They would oftentimes walk through places, and the helicopters or planes would go right over top of them, and it would be dripping from the trees. And they would just walk through it like it was a rain, thinking, oh, that's killing the plants. You couldn't really tell any exposure then. I'm afraid was when they would come back. And then they may come up with, you know, numbness or yes. And I knew someone personally that he, all of a sudden, every time he'd pick up something, he'd lose it and not even realize. And that's when I started getting the Agent Orange Review. It was a little paper. And it would come, I think, maybe every 3 months. And because, first of all, I thought the government will never own up to this. They are so good sometimes at taking care of things quietly. All of a sudden, they said people can have damage from Agent Orange. Of course, for I and Verna, we came home, and when we had our first children, you can bet we took the blanket off of that little one, every one of my 3 children, and you looked and made sure. The big thing, of course, spina bifida. I was very lucky. At this present time, I have 3 healthy older children, and they all have healthy children. But to this day, if any of them would get a cancer, something, I would feel like, I wonder if it was through me. I don't know. There's so much unknown about it. There was one point, and it was when I was in Fubai, that I thought, these wounded are never going to stop coming in. I mean, the new nurses that come in, everybody had 1 year. So there's always somebody leaving and somebody new coming in. And I said, I know how to do this now. I got this down, and I got to stay till it's over. And I stopped riding home. I mean, I was in the zone, you know, and it was get up, do what had to be done, you know. go off to the officers' lounge, dance around, or have a couple beers, and then get some sleep because you're going to start it all over tomorrow again. I think that was possibly the first and only time my dad wrote me. I would always get letters from my brothers and sisters. Dad was a World War II vet. And he just simply said, I don't know what you're thinking, girl, but you've got family back here, and we are worried about you, and you have stopped telling us what you're doing. You have stopped writing home. You know, we are expecting you to come home. So your mother is worried sick. Write her a letter. And, you know, my dad was of the sort that you wrote a letter. All of a sudden, one day, I get this little cardboard package, and I open it up, and it is an engagement ring. And, oh my God, I mean, you did anything to have a party. I bet Like celebrated that for a week, you know. I guess those two things, and I thought, well, you know what? I got to get back home. I think I've got some unfinished business here, and I just think that I'll bring this to a close, and it's going to have to be turned over for those that come and spend their year. Because it was the kind of war that it was, and there was no recognition of these Vietnam vets, people didn't do anything when they came home. They got no welcome, except maybe to be spit upon, to be called baby killers. I talked to a young fellow from my neighborhood, and he said, his wife said, how many babies did you kill? Those wives got no information. No. You know, it was very wrong. It was very wrong. And if ever I get a chance that a marriage has stayed together, I tell that wife, you are fantastic. You don't have to tell me. I know how hard it was. I didn't even talk with my family a whole lot. They were very good. My community, again, I say the support of my family and my community was what got me through a lot of it. Because when I came back, it was like, okay, I've got things to do. Things got to be done. I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. So I come back in November. I'm planning a wedding, and I'm married in February. And in the next year, I'm having a child. And when I go to a grocery store, you were asking about, you know, the grief of, you know, you survived. I couldn't accept that nobody was doing anything back here. I would see these people pushing these food carts out to their car, and I wanted to say, hey, I wanted to like blow a whistle. We need to put a tent up over here. We need blood sent over there, and we can start a blood clinic right here in the parking lot. And what are you doing? Do you know there's kids dying over there? I mean, what are you getting? Your bread and your milk, and they're eating sea rations over there. You know, I can start with Verna's story. It was so good. We were so close. She was very gung-ho. I could take things kind of as they came, you know, and I could smile or laugh things off. But Verna was very serious. We had, right from in Saigon, hadn't been there very long, had right from the field wounded come in. She volunteered. They said, anybody can help. Oh, Verna was going to go. I said, I'll stay here. You know, I can wait. Yeah, she fell apart. It was North Vietnamese regulars, very destructive wounds. She fell apart. And at Third Field, you know, they have everything. They have a psych ward. She was escorted there. I got off shift, was told this, because we roomed together in the hotel. I thought, now, what am I going to do? if Verna can't take it, I don't know if I can take it. And you start thinking, doubting. And about that time, there was a young grunt that lived in Tiffin. His name was Herliska, and he was going home. So he comes to Saigon, and of course moms had talked, and he looked me up. And it was just like a gift, because I'm Bohemian. I would get teased about that, if I was wearing shoes or not in school. And I said, Bill, I don't know. Verna's in the psych unit. I don't know if I can take this. You know, how did you stand a year? And he said, oh my God, Bohemie, if I can take it for a year, you sure in the hell can. And he said, come on, I'm going to show you some good places to eat in this town. And we went out that evening, and he just made me feel like, well, if Bill can do it, I think I can do it. I don't think I've hardly ever missed on a Memorial Day, because he came home, and about a year later, here, was killed in a car accident. I wrote his mom a letter explaining how much he had meant to me, and every Memorial Day, it's kind of special. I would put some red artificial geraniums, and I would say, thanks, Bill. You got me through a bad time when I needed it. And then for Verna, she came out of there, and she understood then what we were up against, and she said, Joanne, it's terrible, but it was just too much coming in too fast. And so we came back to our lives here, and right away, I mean, I was getting on with my life. She was in Utah at that time. She got on with her life. And then she called me one time, 5 years after we'd been home. We wrote Christmas letters and pictures of our kids, and she said, have you got your ammo box out? Have you looked at your pictures or talked about it? I said, no. She said, I think it's time we did. And she said, I've got a lot of the same things that you have, so why don't you come out? And so I flew out, and we did. We opened her box, and we talked, and we laughed, and we cried, and then we drank, and then we laughed, and then we drank some more.